Live. Let's see how everything's going. Cool. This is going to take a minute to come up on everything, so we're going to give everyone a second. Because we're going to be on 4 platforms today. We're on Twitch, on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. So wherever you're watching, hopefully everything's working today. I'll be able to see your chat wherever you are. And we can just say hi to everybody while we talk about Duskmourn. Yeah, so today we got the full set. Or I think yesterday, actually. So we have all the cards now. So this is kind of the part where people start scrambling, right? Like, what type of decks do I want to put together? Should I buy some singles? Should I not? Does this card seem worth it? Is this strategy really going to be a thing? And the reality is, we don't have hard answers to all those things, usually ever. Every once in a while, there's some. I think most of us, to be fair, with Bloomburrow, most of the creators, I think we all hit pretty close to the mark. We were right more often than we were wrong. It's not that often that's going to happen. I don't know why. Maybe Bloomburrow was just more obvious in some of their builds because there was so many like creature themed things, but you know, maybe that was the whole thing. This isn't so much Maisie about submitting decks. That's not really what we're doing here. But now, if people want to talk about deck ideas for Duskmourn, we can do that. If you have a question about a certain type of deck or if certain cards go in there, maybe we build a deck live on stream. We could have that question. But this isn't particularly a deck review stream. That is not what we're doing today. Today, we want to talk about Duskmourn. That's what we want to do. Because this is the big thing. Like, and I'm going to, as usual, here in the next couple days, I'm going to start putting up a bunch of Duskmourn deck ideas so y'all can actually have them ahead of the set going live. I will probably play some of those on stream next Wednesday when we do the early access. I think that's what we call it. The streamer event now is now what it's called. So I'll be doing that. So if y'all want to hop on, same thing wherever you're watching me now. I'll be on most of the day on Wednesday. What I'll tend to do is I'll get on at like 10 a.m. Pacific time until about 2-ish. And then I'll take a break, grab me something to eat. I'll record my podcast, do all that stuff. And then I get back on around 6 or 7 p.m. And then I try to stay until probably about sometime between 11 p.m. and midnight Pacific time. So big chunk of the day. So if you're at work or not, early, late, like you should be able to catch me wherever you are in the world if you want to be on and watch some people play Duskmourn stuff. Yeah, LevDev says Duskmourn is a tad trickier to analyze this time around. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a real thing when you compare it to Bloomburrow, right? Because I think in Bloomburrow, we all started at least a base point of, let's just figure out which of these creature types are good, right? And it turned out to be like lizards, otters, rabbits, mice, bats, for the most part, was solid. And then frogs, pretty good. Unfortunately, birds, not so much. Squirrels, not so much, you know. But, like, we had to figure that out. And then it was like, okay, the next level was, now let's start looking at cards that didn't necessarily fit those creature types, but worked in a lot of different decks, right? And then that's where we kind of start deep diving. I think on something like Duskmourn, you only really have 2 themes, if you want to call it that. There's enchantment stuff, and then there's room stuff. And then everything else, while it can be a theme where you talk about like survivors or glimmers or whatever, aren't really like a deck. They're almost like parts of other decks. So then you just start exploring where those cards live, right? Are they going to go into current decks? Are we making all new decks? Obviously, the rooms are going to kind of be their own thing for the most part. But a lot of the enchantments happen to also just be decent creatures. So are we building around them? Are they going into other lists? Are we caring that they're enchantments? Honestly, Duskmourn has, and one of the videos I'm going to be working on probably tomorrow or the next day, it's just a video of a bunch of cards get better because of Duskmourn, right? If people shift to playing some of these cards, there's a whole pile of things that are going to be even better. So you may have to even start looking back over the last 2-3 years, since Standard's so big now, that some of those cards we didn't play now become playable, right? So that's a whole different conversation other than just what's playable in Duskmourn. TCG dude says, Howdy from Alaska. First time catching you live. Been enjoying your Magic Mics and Color Magic podcast. Thank you so much. I'm glad people enjoy that other stuff. Like, we have so much, like, we put so much time into those other things. You never know who's going to be watching them or care about them or not. So it's always cool when you get to see that. Hey, JM Rowe, how's it going over on Twitch? I see you. Gabriel says, personally, I could do without another form of morph creatures. Otherwise, pretty excited for standard implications. You know, I feel that, right? Because you kind of go, we're just kind of rerunning an old mechanic. The one thing I will say, though, for Manifest Dread is this time, like, I feel like the last couple of times we did something like that, it was limited because we only had, like, one set that really focused on that, right? But fortunately, in this case, we have a set from a few sets back that care about face-down creatures, right? We had some of that even in Karlov Manor. So we have way more cards that care about face-down stuff. And in different colors even. So now we kind of get to explore this mechanic a little bit further. So in this case, I don't mind that we're running it back because we have multiple things to use it with, right? I think if it had just been this set and we're running it back, it'd be really, really hard to have a strong playable deck with what we know is in Duskmourn now. But I feel like because of the other options we have from past sets, it might actually be a thing. I mean, really. Because we made cards that not only have an effect, but you also get a 2/2. And then we have a bunch of other stuff that cares about face-down things, putting counters on face-down things, turning things face-up when they die, like all kinds of things that now we have enough stuff that we can actually build around. So if people wanted to play that deck and it kind of struggled before, now you have real options. It'll be a little weird because I think we have some stuff that'll manifest and some stuff that'll be another thing or whatever. So you have to kind of keep track of that. At least on Arena, it does that for you. If you play in paper, you need to just bring some extra little markers or dice or something. TCG Jude said, standard about to be in Super Saiyan mode. You know, okay, I want to say this. In all reality, if y'all aren't playing standard, you are really missing out. For two reasons. One, standard's really good right now. Among players of all different skill levels I've talked to or whatever, even if they're not big fans of standard, they all say standard's good right now. And I would say the people who say they don't like standard either just haven't been winning while they're playing it, so people think anything sucks they're not winning at, or they genuinely haven't played standard. Like, I honestly believe that. Now, the other reason you should be playing standard is because the prizes right now for some events are stupid compared to the attendance. Like, I've literally gone to, 4 events now? 5 events in the last couple months? And they've all been small crowds, and I've been able to win $150, $300 prizes, whatever, for $0 to $10 entry fee at a lot of these stores. Genuinely. Like, some of them, I had to beat like 4 people. Hell, the one I played in 2 weeks ago, I got the $300, whatever that was, Urza Saga foil land. The event only had, I think, 9 or 10 people. That was it. I paid $10. I was done in like 4 hours. You know what I mean? Like, the one before that I played, and I got one of the big oversized Resplendent Angel, I think it was. I still have it sitting on the other side of my bookshelf. So go play. And in the weekly events now you can get the Cowboy Bebop altered art or whatever stuff, right? So if you're a fan of that, that's really cool. So, like, they're doing the right things to get people to go play standard. Hell, I just saw today that Tolarian Community College, for the first time in, what feels like a decade, has done a video on, hey, here's new cards in Duskmourn for standard that you should consider, or whatever. So, like, even he's looking into standard and saying standard's good, and he's not even a standard channel. He talks about pretty much everything else but standard. So, yeah, if you're not giving it a go, I say go for it. Night Sky says, how's my day going? Pretty good, all things considered. I wasn't doing too great 2 days ago. I wasn't feeling great. Just, typical short-term stomach bug or whatever. But other than that, it's just getting things in line, making sure I can keep up with all the Duskmourn stuff for y'all. That's kind of what I'm doing right now. Though, I think at like 6 o'clock tonight or something. I should probably check that right now. That's the other thing. You can find tournaments around you if you just download the companion app. It's super convenient. But I'll probably be going to another store championship tonight because I think one store's local store's Friday Night Magic or whatever. They're changing to be that. So that's what I'm gonna go do. Locator. Here we go. Yeah, locator just shows. Yeah, it's at. Oh, it's at 5. One's at 5:30. Where's the other one at? There's so many events near me. This is crazy. Nope, the one I need to go to is at 6:30. All right, local time. So I still have a couple hours. Gabriel says, true, hide in plain sight is a sleeper. Yeah, that's one of those cards, right? Like what we didn't play before, but now that things care about stuff being face down, you might consider. Matter of fact, let me bring that up so people know what we're talking about. Here we go. Let's do this. This thing. So 4 mana, look at the top 5 cards of your library, cloak 2 of them, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So they're cloaked, not manifested, which means they still have Ward 2 or whatever. Or I think that's what they had. No, you pay 2 and you turn it face up. That's what it is. So at Ward 2, you turn it face up for its mana cost. Still pretty strong. Again, don't know what those decks are going to look like yet, what cards we're putting under there. But this is the type of card that if you want one right now, they're 10 cents in paper if you want to get these to have them to play in some event down the road. Or if you're even thinking about it, right? This is the type of card you can take a chance on right now for 10 to 25 cents. And even if you don't end up playing the deck or the deck doesn't end up being strong, you're not out anything. But if the deck becomes something, this easily goes up to being a 50-cent, $1 card. Right? Maybe even up to a $2 card, but not likely. Probably 50 cents to $1. So, totally reasonable, though. LevDev says, same with the Naya deck you posted. Much obliged, by the way. No, that deck is crazy. I won with that deck, and I came in 3rd with it another time. So, yeah, that deck's really, really good. It is a fun deck to play in paper, too. The thing is, though, it does have a lot of triggers. So there's some weird, like, clunky turns where you have to keep track of everything that's happening. Because I've literally had, like, a turn with Annie joins up out, and you have Moira, and then she, like, triggers multiple times during the main phase. So you got to remember that mana. And then you go to cast, like, an Atali, but then Atali triggers twice. But then the middle of the ability, you're resolving one of them that comes into play, and it's a legend, so now it triggers. So, like, it gets kind of dumb. Usually, though, when you're at that state, you're winning that turn or the next turn. But it does have some pretty silly turns. TCG Dude says, yes, sir, standard be thriving. I agree. Out of curiosity, what's my take on the Yawgmoth's Will Room? I don't know what that one is. Let me go take a look. Let me go look up rooms. That's so weird that room is a type we can put in there now. I'm assuming the text is like pay life, draw a card. Since we're talking about, well, pay life? I don't know. Play stuff out of the graveyard? You said Yawgmoth's Will Room. All right, I'll just look at all the rooms real quick. And I'll see about what it can bring up. Which one would that be? Oh, it's the green mythic room. Okay, that helps. I was wondering, because I didn't remember a black one coming up that was like that. But some of these I've looked at, like, when they got previewed a while ago. Let's see. You may cast spells from your... Oh, it's this one. Okay. Man, the resolution on this one is bad. But you must be talking about the right side. So Forgotten Cellar. When you look at this door, you may cast spells from your graveyard this turn. And if you cast a card... And if a card would be put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn, exile it. I mean, the problem here with these cards is, like, I accept that this ability is powerful. My issue is, where are we getting all the mana, right? Because we have to still pay for these. So you pay 5 just to get access to the spells, but then you still have to pay to cast them. So it's like, where am I getting all the mana? When did I get all the cards in my graveyard? I don't know. This feels like the walk-in closet I get, being able to play lands from your graveyard, because there's a bunch of different decks right now that using like Lumra and stuff like that care about having lands in your graveyard. Forgotten Cellar, I guess, like, if your goal is to get a bunch of stuff in the graveyard and maybe play the black card, like you can sacrifice all your lands, like, there's something there. I don't know. This feels like the type of card that, while it's good, I would venture to guess no more than one deck plays this card in Standard consistently. Maybe two. Because it's a strong ability, but I think you have to have a very specific set of circumstances before you even want to cast it. Right? Because you have to, like, get the mana, you got to get the stuff in the yard, you have to have a turn while it's relevant, and your opponent probably doesn't have a counter or discard spell or blah, blah, any of that stuff. Right? So, like, I don't really know. That's a tough one. Yeah, you're thinking potential, since you can turn on and off the will, maybe in Roots. That's my thing, though, right? A lot of times I get comments on YouTube videos from people who say, like, oh, but you could play this card. And it's usually like a two-pronged thing. It's like, one, yes, we can, but is it helping you win more? Or is it just style points, right? The other is, what would we replace to play whatever card is that you're saying we need to put into the list? Because then you're saying the new card has to add some level of consistency or percentage points for win percentage to justify the other cards then not being in the list. Right? And I don't even know, like, if I was playing Roots, I mean, like, and this is only for a turn, right? Because it says when you unlock this door. So it's not even forever. So yeah, I don't know. I don't even know. Yeah, I don't know where I would put this just yet. It's maybe it's not even for Standard. You know, now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe there's some world where you want to play this in older formats where you have access to a bunch of, like, 0-cost artifacts or 1-cost mana creatures or whatever the case is, right? Or things you can sacrifice and combo off, right? So then you're like, okay, I'm going to play all these things, but I'm going to sacrifice them all, get this just mana or cards or whatever, and then do whatever I'm going to do. Maybe that's more likely, and it's like a combo piece more than anything. But yeah, I don't know if I would be looking to play this in Standard. For me right now, probably not going to be playing this or even looking to build a deck with this in Standard beyond before the first week at least. I'm going to be focusing on other things. This probably why it didn't really immediately register when you said it. It just wasn't something I was even thinking about. Backing up a little bit here, Jonathan Rowe on YouTube says, I just wish people would show up. All the stores around me drop Standard Showdown because it's only like 2 to 3 people. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's a tough thing, right? Because it's the chicken egg, cart horse, whatever you want to call it. Like, some number of people have to be the first. So when the other people show up, there's people. So if you want something to grow, and even back when I had my store, I would tell people this because, you know, there's tons of new games that come along, and there's always people going, oh, we should run tournaments, we should this, and then they do it, and like 4 people show up. And it's like, okay, well, if you want it to happen and then you don't show up for the next 3, each time there's a new person that shows up, they show up and there's 2 to 4 people. So over the course of the month, there could have been 10 people, but nobody showed up to more than 2 of the opportunities, right? So it's a tough situation. And some of that's on the stores too. Some of them, you know, maybe can make it more enticing, promote it more, whatever, right? Some of it is stores haven't successfully had historically had success with an event type. So they look at a format and go like, and we'll put it on the schedule, and then that's all they do, right? Whether it's Standard or Legacy or whatever. right? So they never even give it an opportunity to get off the ground. So some of that does come down to the players, or even building a second deck or whatever. So if people want to play, they have something available. You know, there's other ways you can work to promote the stuff. But Standard, the other thing I'll say for it is, we already know there's going to be more tournaments next year, more of the fake Grand Prix, if you want to call them that. So those will be a thing. And people will be looking to play those, which means more pros are going to be talking about them and blah, 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 blah. So over the course of next year, I do expect there to be more interest in Standard because it's just going to be topic of more conversation, I would think. Trexadaxel, how's it going? Hey, Christmas, how's it going? Hanging out on the Twitch. Corzan, good evening to you. Still early, late afternoon, early evening for me. That was a question somebody asked in one of my Discord channels this week, though. Was like, what do you consider evening? And for me, it's usually like 5 o'clock, like after work, after school for people. So for me, it's still kind of late afternoon. I see London was testing. I don't know what they were testing, but hey. Ophidian, welcome. Speaker, the card we were just talking about, I wouldn't say it's dumb that it was a singular turn effect. It kind of has to be for balance purposes, right? Because if it's not, just giving somebody the ability to play cards out of their graveyard again just means infinitely any type of effects that let you discard to draw, anything that doesn't exile a thing, whatever. It's just like having a whole new hand every turn. But it's even larger, right? Because once you're past, like, let's say the game's in turn 10 or whatever, the graveyard's probably got 12, 14, 16 cards in there. Like, you can't have somebody have access to that just for free every single turn for game balance, whatever the game is, right? You can't just give somebody access to 16 plus new cards every turn. And it's growing, right? Every turn. Because then if something dies or you discard a thing or you mill yourself, like, that's new cards in the graveyard you have access to, right? And then you have to start worrying about cost balance. Because, like, to mill yourself costs between 1 and 3. So now you can put something cheap over there and use some other cheap cost ability. So now you're almost going to be doing 2 things a turn every turn with access to all these new things you put in the graveyard. So, like, it has to be just, like, a one-turn thing or else it's kind of crazy. Now, that being said, we do have cards that lock and unlock rooms. You can pick up enchantments and replay them, right? There's a lot of ways that could be a thing. So, you never know. Gabriel Marr says, yeah, I go to like 3 different stores to find standard events. The store championships have been good, though. Yeah, totally. I think people should be playing those. The prizes are too good to at least not take a cheap shot at it. What about Zur with the Overlords? I think Zur with Overlords is overkill. I think my question would be, what does Zur do for the Overlords? Not saying it's like you can't play them, but like, what is it doing for them? I guess is the thing here. Because, like, let's say, let me bring up all the Zerker. I know which one you're talking about. The one that's standard legal, right? This one. Right? So, enchantment creatures you control have Death Touch, Lifelink, Hexproof. Target non-aura enchantment you control becomes a creature, and it just, like, they're already sizable creatures. They already have good effects. They already have an effect when you, what do you call it? Impending them or whatever. Like, this is better with other things that aren't already creatures or don't already have big abilities. Right? Not saying you can't play it with those things, but for their cost and everything else, I don't know if you'd want to. Like, it just doesn't seem like, it seems like you're trying too much, trying too hard. Like, as the trendy kids say, you're doing too much. You're trying to do the most. You know, like, it just, I don't know if it's necessary. I think would be my thing. Not saying it can't be beneficial. I just think there are easier ways to do things with the Overlords and easier ways to do stuff with Zur. And you're trying to shoot the moon for Magic Christmas Land when the, what's the best way to describe it? Like, when the effectiveness of that thing isn't that much greater than the other things. Like, it's a case where it might not be as good. It may not actually be, like, the sum of the parts may not be as good as the parts separately, I think is what I'm trying to say. Like, if you go either direction, it might be more consistent and better than putting them together. Now, still could totally be wrong, but that's my first blush on based on how the cards work and what they do and everything else. I just don't know if it's necessary. TC Jude says, I'm all about the Boros tokens, Monastery Mentor, Caretaker's Talent. Super fun. Monastery Mentor. Caretaker's Talent. Oh, yeah, I got you. The 3-mana thing. For some reason, I was thinking of Swissbeard. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, that's probably totally reasonable, honestly. A little tough that, like, both cards you want cost 3, but they're good. Mikhail says, that is a good idea. I've only been going to one store, but I'll have to start looking around for another at least. Yeah, like, if y'all don't know, I'm going to switch screens here, or scenes here for just a second. But if you don't know, there is an app you can download. It's called Magic Companion. It's free. Wizards makes it. Honestly, yours truly was one of the first people to start forcing down that road so they would work on it. That's a whole conversation. That's story time for another time. But you can go in here, and it has a locator. And it automatically will bring up all the events near you, so you don't even have to, like, punch anything nowhere, like, because it's using your phone. So, like, you literally go in, and you can just go, oh, these are all the events happening today near me. Or you can put in a date range or format you're looking for or whatever, and it's just right there. Like, so if you're ever bored or curious, you have time in an afternoon or you're not doing anything for the evening, you can literally just bring it up and see what all events are going on within, like, 15 miles of you or whatever. It's actually a good app. Just saying. Like, find stuff. It's a good app. Promise. See you later, Dev. Off to do family stuff. Nicodemus, how's it going over on Twitch? Good afternoon. Fitting you all right. It is evening somewhere. Zach Slaw says, hello, PowrDragn. Good to see you over on the YouTubes. Old Man Dorn, how's it going over on Twitch? Yeah, also don't forget, it's Sub Timber over on Twitch. So if you want to sub, that'll help out the channel. You can do it on the cheap right now. Or here's the other thing too. If you just want to support me on my channel on YouTube, I have different membership levels, like as cheap as 99 cents, where especially when new sets come out, you get to decide kind of things that we're going to do on the channel, what stuff to feature. Like, all my members get to select stuff on those. Those are private polls and stuff to go out to them. All the way up to a third level that's like $4.99, which is basically equivalent to what you pay on Twitch. But if you want private deck help or whatever else, I have a form that goes straight to me that you can do that over there on YouTube. So if you want to support your boy, I have some ways, and you get some cool stuff back and get to participate. Yeah, I get that Zerker will make them creatures early, but Zerker can also make other things creatures early that wouldn't otherwise have an effect. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you can do stuff with the rooms when you may not be able to unlock the other rooms, right? You might play the cheap room for 2 or 3, but you still get to turn a room into a, whatever, 8/8 or whatever, right? Which is pretty damn strong. As opposed to, like, okay, I did this thing with the, what's it called? The Overlord, and I got some ability, and that was kind of cool, but it was already going to become a creature anyway. So, like, could I just do more with the thing that wouldn't already be a creature? That's what I'm wondering. Probably Overlords with a bunch of board wipes, control cards. Well, some version of that will always exist, whether it's an Overlord or not, right? It could be a big angel, it could be planeswalkers, it could be whatever. Like, those are always going to exist. Appearance of synergy doesn't always mean efficient use of mana and card spots. Yeah, that's a tough thing, right? When you're talking about deck building. And I've even done that, right? So I don't think anyone's beyond it. But, like, there's sometimes you read words on a card. In the most simplest example, let's say, you know, you're building a +1/+1 counters deck. Because this is one that I see people mess up with a lot of times. And they just go, oh, all these cards put counters on. I want to play this and this and this and this, and they all put counters. That's great. But in actuality, they're doing different things with counters, right? Like one might put counters but care about stuff when it dies. And then another one, you get to put multiple counters, but it's only during the attack step. And then you have stuff like Tumblewag that like needs you to saddle it so you could double the counters. But then, it's like, okay, so am I playing stuff that's big enough to saddle or not? And then do I have things that don't necessarily just get wiped to temporary lockdown? And but like there's all these other things you have to consider other than just these words kind of do a similar thing together. Right? Because even within one mechanic, like we're saying +1/+1 counters, there's a bunch of different ways you can get +1/+1 counters, right? Like you can double them up on things, you can get them from the backup ability. Some cards just get them when you cast creatures. We have enchantments that just put stuff on things, put +1/+1s on things, even if you don't have the cards themselves generating them, right? So there's a bunch of different ways you kind of have to decide what theme am I trying to go with and then build around that for efficiency. And that's hard. I mean, some of it's just trial and error. There's not always a secret to it. Blake says, what are the cards you think will make the most of a self-mill deck if there is one? You're probably going to have to ask me more specifically about a card, honestly. Like, if there's a whole deck strategy or whatever we want to talk about, or like a selection of cards you want to talk about, like something like that. I think just like these cards, like just does this do a thing? I think that's a lot harder thing to answer right now. Pyroclasm and other cheap removal will destroy this game. I don't know if that's true. Partly because we have had a variety of things that deal 1 to creatures, deal 3 to creatures, deal not -2/-2 to creatures. Like literally for the last, I don't even know. I can't even remember a time where that hasn't been in standard. Right? And a lot of times it's been like 1 mana, deal 1 to everything, or 3 mana, deal 3 to everything. So like is 2 mana, deal 2 to everything significantly different? Like, I don't know that it is. And which decks want to play that over playing something like, say, Brotherhood's End, right? And I think that's a real question. Not just Brotherhood's End, but we have the black card, the Miasma or whatever that gives everything minuses, and there's a whole selection of things. Each of those has better reasonings for things, right? With Brotherhood's End, you can also get rid of problematic enchantments of things like Simulacrum and things like that, right? So you get some flexibility. You can also hit Planeswalkers, right? That's a thing. There's the -2/-2 things actually matter right now because there's cards playing the mouse that gets bigger and hits you when it dies, playing the other 1/1 in red that when it hits you when it dies, it can do however much damage, right? Like, or when it dies, it deals that much damage. So those actually keep those from dealing damage to you as well, right? So those are already flexible and good, and we're playing those, which is why I looked at Pyroclasm, and your first thought is like, oh, this was a really good playable card. But then you start asking yourself, like, what decks want to play Pyroclasm and not play one of those other cards? Like, I don't know if that deck... Now, not to say that deck won't exist within the next 3 years of this card's in Standard. Very well will. But as it stands, I don't know of one that wants to do it. Now, you might sideboard it. I think if you're playing best of 3, and especially if you're playing a paper tournament, maybe you put 2 or 3 Pyroclasm in the sideboard, because you're just like, okay, well, if I run up against, like, rabbits or something else, maybe I pick off a couple of small creatures. It has some uses. It could do a thing. But again, you already have temporary lockdown. You already have Brotherhood's End. Even 4-mana sweepers have been effective already. There's a good bunch of good spot removal. So, like, I think it's at least worth a shot before we declare Pyroclasm too good. I don't know that it is, and I don't right now believe that we have an indicator that it will be too good. I mean, I would even argue that against a lot of decks, like once they pump up or put a like rage on something like a Swift Spear, but now you can't even kill it with a Pyroclasm, right? Because it's always going to be a 2/3 at a minimum. So it actually becomes worse than some of the other cards we're already playing now. And that's one of the problems or decks you'd want to play it against. So yeah, not totally sure. Again, I think it's a good card, but to just say that it'll destroy the game, that's a hugely hyperbolic statement, I think, right now. Boom, 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 boom. Hey, Michael left us a $10 super chat on YouTube. I almost said Facebook, but on YouTube. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have work soon, so thank you and enjoy your night. Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Which Overlord do I like the most? That's a good question. Which Overlord do I like the most? Wow, that's actually, it's tough because we haven't played with them yet. And it's not even just like the cards being good. Are they not creature type Overlord? Oh no, they're like nightmare horrors or whatever those things are, right? I was like, why is that? Let me put enchantment for a creature type, but all right, it'll make them come up faster. Okay. The problem is not just the abilities being what they are. It's also having to figure out like where they fit within the decks that we're playing. So maybe we just go through the Overlords one by one and just talk about them. And maybe that's a better exercise. Because I think one of the things that happens as players, as humans even, I don't even know if just as players, we're very quick to want to like rank things. But there's been many times over the years that we've looked at cards and we all agree that the words on a card are very good. But because the metagame exists the way it does, or some other one or two cards exist, it makes that card so much worse. You know, and I think that could be the case potentially on the Overlords, especially throughout their life in Standard. Because again, we're going to be playing with these for another 2 years and 9 months or whatever. So there's a real world where each of these Overlords might go from being very good to very bad to mediocre to very bad to very good to mediocre to very good, all in that 3-year window. Right? Because what they're trying to do, like in this case with the Overlord of the Belmark, there might be a bunch of stuff that people start playing that removes graveyards. Right? So then this might fall off. But then if the anti-graveyard strategies start falling behind because the format becomes more aggro-y, mid-rangey, whatever stuff that doesn't care about the graveyard, then those go away and then this card gets elevated again. Right? So it could be anything like that that could affect these types of cards. That being said, this one is just quality in general, right? Even if you never use the impending ability, it's a 5/5 for 5 that at worst, you cast it, you pay 5, you get a 5/5, you get a thing out of the graveyard into your hand. Well, from what you milled, right? So, actually, it's not even that. It's just from the graveyard, right? So it enters or attacks, mill 4 cards. Then you may return a non-avatar creature card or planeswalker card from your graveyard. So not even from the cards that are milled. So you're almost always going to get something for this for your 5 mana, right? At worst. You play it, you get a thing from your graveyard into your hand. Then you attack, you get a thing from your graveyard into your hand. So unless they kill it on sight, it's worth at least 2 cards before it gets into combat and dies. Minimum worth at least 1 extra card. And this is not even considering impending. And impending solid, you know, back to the previous question somebody asked, like, are there cards that are good for self-mill strategies? Like, this is definitely one of them. Right? Like, you can play this for the 2 mana, put it down, mill your graveyard, and then if there's a key card you need from your graveyard, well, you can now put it in your hand so you have it for later. Or just build your graveyard so your creatures that care about the graveyard are bigger or whatever. Your Tarmogoyfs or whatever, or Lurgoyfs or whatever it is, you know, really care. So yeah, this one I think is solid because it does what it does effectively no matter what. And 5 is not an unreal cost. Like, we've seen that many, many times already. I think if there's an issue, it's just going to be how much your deck cares about the graveyard. Right? Because at 5, I think for a very long time, we're going to have to keep having the conversation of, Would I rather have this or would I rather have Aclazotz? Like, I think that's going to continue to be a question in black. Aclazotz is that good. It's a 5 mana 4/4 with flying, with lifelink. You know, makes your opponent discard, possibly generates you a creature. When it dies, you can get it back, right? It just does so much. So I think we're always going to have to look at that for as long as that's in standard. At some point, we will want to play something more than Aclazotz. But I think in the event that your deck cares about the graveyard specifically, you're obviously playing this card. I think in decks where you don't care about your graveyard as much, then it becomes a question of how much do I want to get cards back into my hand, right? Versus the life gain and my opponent discarding from the Aclazotz. And that may be on a deck by deck basis. So I think that's going to be the toughest issue for this card. Supple says, I wonder if this standard meta is going to be a triangle. Anti-graveyard aggro. Oh, anti-graveyard, aggro, and graveyard. Similar to how standard was with Epiphany. I don't think so. I think right now there's just too many different decks in standard. Like, there's quality mid-rangey things, there's theme stuff, there's aggro of different varieties, there's control decks, there's the domain stuff. Like, I mean, you're adding some graveyard stuff into the mix, but then there's also, like we were talking about earlier, we'll call it the face-down deck, going to be a mid-rangey option, right? So then that's another deck we're adding into the pile of stuff. So yeah, I don't think it'll be a triangle anytime soon. Now, usually when you have a triangle, it's often because there's like a huge pillar deck of each of these 3 deck types, and those 3 dominate the metagame. Right now, I don't think we have a clear... I don't even think we have a clear aggro deck dominating the metagame, but nor do we have a clear control deck dominating the metagame, and honestly don't have a clear mid-rangey deck, right? Because there's a few different things that fall into that spot. There's the Naya Legend stuff, there's the Golgari stuff, there's whatever. So I think we still have a lot of room. It's just adding another deck to the format, I think. Yeah, Finn says, I still say Aclazotz. Yeah, and I think that's the problem. Like, Aclazot's still going to make the cut for a lot of decks, I think. It's neat, though. You know, I don't have a problem with it. I think this Overlord's good. Just probably not for as many decks as people would consider. Overlord of the Boilerbugs. This one's a little different because it's a 6 mana for a 5/5. So that's already kind of like, it doesn't make you feel as good. However, it does deal 4 damage to any target, which is real. You know, like, that is something. Just straight up being able to, like, I have a 5/5 and I killed one of your creatures. Right? Or your opponent has to leave mana up because they're at, like, 5 or less life, or 4 or less life, I guess. And this is a problem when they know you're playing it. So that is real. And then it's 4 mana for Impending, just to pay 4, deal 4. Also can hit any targets. You can hit Planeswalkers and stuff with it too. The thing about it, though, is it feels like this wants to be in some mid-rangey pile. Something that's maybe like reanimating it for free or sacrificing it and getting it back just to get those free 4 damage triggers. Like, if you can find that, that's probably where this card goes. But, like, obviously the mono red aggro don't want this. Like, that's just, a bunch of them wouldn't even ever have 4 mana, much less 6 mana to play this thing. Right? It's just not a thing. I'm trying to think of, like, is there a Rakdos or Gruul mid-rangey thing that's ramping up for mana that might play this? Like, possibly. But then the question is, like, if I'm just ramping, do I want this for 6, or would I rather have, like, I don't know, just cast Smuggler Surprise and do something, right? Well, that's the thing. Like, is this better than the other things you're playing in the Smuggler Surprise deck, right? Or would we want to play this over Terror of the Peaks? You know, like, would we want to play this over, like, Vaultborn Tyrant? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the problem. Like, this is the questions you run into in deck building as you get more and more cards, right? Now, if this was just a 2-year standard, there absolutely would be cards you'd play this over, no doubt. But I think as the way things are built, like, are we playing this over some of those other things? Like, I don't know. Like, now the question is, does a new deck emerge to play this? Like, could you play some wild thing that's Boros or Naya with, I don't know, like Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, and then get 2 triggers off this when it enters, and now you're dealing 8, right? Like, maybe that's a thing, right? I mean, you could play Elish Norn 1/5 mana, and then you have 6 mana the next turn, however you get there, whether you're ramping up or whatever, and then, like, maybe? I mean, like, that's a thing. I'm like, I don't know, Scroll Shift. Oh, I forgot about that card. Like, this thing. So you can exile and return it, right? Like, so that's an option if you're playing some type of blink deck. The problem is most of the blink decks tend to be, like, blue-white. So you'd have to, like, force red in there. So it's like, I don't know if there's enough other things to justify playing red other than this. But maybe, you know, like, could be one of those things. This card is not unique to generate new deck types. Red decks have better options. It's not so much about this card generating the deck type, right? We're not saying everything has to be built around this card. I'm saying, does the existence of this card make other cards that weren't being played now slide into a deck that you have a bunch of things that trigger when they enter, or a bunch of things that are dealing direct damage, or whatever, right? Or some burn deck that now has a creature option at the upper end that is also threatening, or whatever, right? Like, possible. Arguably, I was playing a big red control deck, right? With Koth and Jaya Ballard and red sweepers and whatever. Like, this could totally fit in there. You're hitting all your land drops with Koth. Koth eventually ends up just doing direct damage anyway, right? This is a thing that is removal, because it's 4 mana, remove a creature effectively. You sweep the board, and then this shows up 3 turns later, or 2 turns later, depending on when you cast it. So, like, maybe. That's what I'm saying. Like, this card you're not building around, but could it be part of another deck that was, like, on the fringes? Like, possibly. You know, I don't think we have to think in terms of, like, this has to be the linchpin to the deck. Like, that deck might only play 2 copies of this. But could it go into one of those piles? Like, that's the question you have to ask sometimes. The blue one. So this is Overlord of the Flood Pits. 5 mana, 5/3. Impending of 3. It has flying. And when it enters or attacks, you draw 2, then discard 1. This one's interesting because 5 mana, again, reasonable, especially in blue-based decks. A 5/3 that flies, pretty good. You get to draw 2, discard. Even if you just impending, like, paying 3 to draw 2, discard 1 is actually not bad, right? Like, that's a thing a fair amount of decks with blue would be willing to consider, right? Considering that it eventually comes with a 5/3 attached to it. So, like, this could just get played just because, right? If there's a turn where your opponent's not really putting you under threat, you've dealt with a couple other things, you're like, you know what? I'll just draw a couple cards, and now you just have this threatening you over here in a couple turns. So, like, yeah, why not? Right? This is playable. How much we're going to see of it, I don't know. I mean, it does have the biggest flaw of all of them being just 3 toughness. So it does die to a lot of things we're already playing to deal with several of the aggro decks or whatever. You know, it dies to all of the lightning strikes, lightning helix, you know, all that stuff. So that's the downside to this card. But it's reasonable. So, like, and I think the thing about this is, this one, you don't even have to think that hard about where it fits. It's like, would my deck be willing to play a card that just says, draw 2, discard 1? If the answer is yes, then you could just play like 2 copies of this and not care. And then eventually you just have a 5/3 to go with it. So this probably will see some amount of play. Like, honestly, think about this. The mono blue variety of decks right now either are Eluge, the big, like, water serpent thing, or some combination of decks that have Haudijin, right? They want to get stuff in the graveyard anyway. Now, they don't necessarily want extra creatures in the deck, but you're already getting to draw and discard, fill up the graveyard, load your hand up for the next turn. They might play 2 copies of this, and it would be totally reasonable. You know, so yeah, this one I expect we'll see some in some number of decks. Now, this is the one that's probably gotten the most hype. Overlord of the Hauntwoods. 5 mana, so reasonable, 6/5. It has Impending 4 for 3 mana. And when it enters or attacks, you basically create a land. You know, it has a land that has every land type, and it's called Everywhere. Sure, domain, yeah, but like, anything can play this. You know, in some ways, it actually helps against domain in a way that it gives you both a land to ramp up and do what you want, but then now if they sweep the board, you have something a couple turns later, right? It's a big body, you know, 6/5 for 5. Just quality card. I mean, I think it's good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say this card's not good. I think it's good. I don't know if it's worth the hype. I don't know if it's hype-worthy good yet. I mean, to the point. I mean, you can get copies for like $15. So, I mean, it's at least come down significantly. You know, like, that helps a lot. But yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good. And I think some of the hype has died down on this a little bit as people have come around to it. At one point, people were making it sound like this was going to be an every deck card and whatever. And it's like, is it though? Now, I will say this. Here's a conversation I think we can really have though. Like, let's say in November when whatever it's called, Foundations hits, right? What if we Llanowar Elf on 1, this thing on 2, and now we're loaded with whatever that is, 1, 2, 3, 5 mana on turn 3. Like that's pretty significant, right? Now, is that better than just playing some other creature on 2 that can do something that's 3 mana? Like, I don't know. I'd have to consider it. But like, there are some silly ramp strategies you'll have access to. But the other problem with green too is we already have just tons of good bodies, right? Even sized up over their costs. We have 3 3s for 2. We've got 4 4s for 3. We have 4 5s for 3. We have 5 5s for 4. You know, it's just like, at what point do we just say like, all right, it's a big body, but then what? Right? It's how much do we really want that extra land? And then let's see, Overlord of Hauntwoods enters, create a tapped colorless land token. So we can't even use the mana right then. It's tapped. And it's a token. So you know what else that means? If your opponent's playing cards like they're already playing, like, oh no, wait. Does temporary lockdown say non-land? I think it does. Yeah, it has to say non-land, right? Yeah, sorry. So you won't be able to you won't lose it to a temporary lockdown. So like, that's at least good. So yeah, again, I think this is good. I think it'll be played. I think people are more scared of it than they need to be. But it is good. I mean, the thing I'll say for like domain decks and stuff is obviously, if you were willing to play the dinosaur we had previously, the 3 mana 4/4 that would go get a basic land, like of course you'll play this, right? Because the dinosaur wasn't even blocking for like 2 or 3 turns anyway after you played it. So this isn't going to do that either. You know what I mean? But it's still ramping you up and getting you a land. So like, if you're willing to play that, then like you'll probably play this, I would think. It's kind of the same. Like, you have to wait an extra turn before you can attack with it or block with it. So like, sure. Yeah, Topiary Stomper. That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, I don't know. Glissa, who takes counters off things, could be a field day with most of these Overlords. Also the card that takes counters in black, render inert. Like, again, yeah, somebody brought this up in a comment the other day. Like, you can, but is that significantly better than just having a better card in that slot? Like, we're talking about scenarios that are trying to make cards... We're trying to make cards that are already really good, great. You know, like, Like, don't be wrong, we're gonna play Glissa anyway. So Glissa, sure, we're all in. We're all doing Glissa stuff regardless. You know what I mean? Glissa's still a good card. Going to be a good card the entire time it's in standard. Glissa, hell, I'd argue Glissa's even better now because there's more things that are enchantments, right? So now Glissa becomes more of a must-block card for a lot of decks, or must-kill card. So, yeah, Glissa's still going to get to stay a lot of play anyway. So if those scenarios come up where we already have a Glissa, then sure. Like, am I wanting to render inert just to make my Overlords better? Like, I'd have to start questioning, like, if I'm playing render inert, then I also have to start looking at, like, how many battles am I willing to play? You know? Like, or... yeah, it'd probably just mostly be battles. Like, I'd really have to consider how many battles and or Overlords am I willing to play to justify render inert. Because if it's mostly just to make my Overlords better, then I'm not even going to bother. Because my Overlords are already good and I'm already getting value. And then if Glissa just does her thing periodically, she does her thing. You know? What doubles tokens? I don't know if it doubles, but you could play... anything with proliferate. Right? You could proliferate and just make your opponent's stuff last way longer, which is funny. So, like, that's a thing you can do. You can keep adding tokens. It's not a thing that comes up that often, but totally reasonable. Oh, you said doubles tokens. I was talking about double counters. We said, okay. Obadija says, remember that TCG player today only is giving 8% back on sealed products. Look at getting your sealed products. Oh, yeah. By the way, anybody who wants to sponsor the channel, I got sponsor slots. Just saying. But I will say, somebody who does sponsor the channel is Moxfield. So if you want to save deck list or do all your testing or whatever, they have a whole thing that lets you do like sample draws and all that, whatever, built in once you put your deck in there. So go use Moxfield if you're not. It's really good. Caretaker's Talent copies tokens. Yeah, absolutely. Copying this with 3 steps ahead and Season of Weaving seems great. Sort of, but my question is to what end? Right? Like, that comes up so often in comments, personally, but you could do this. And I'm like, okay, cool, but then what? Like, what are we aiming for after we get those extra lands that we aren't already able to do? Right? Like, I don't hate the idea, but it's just like, what's the payoff? Yeah, see, now we're just going too deep. Like, 3 blind mice, whatever. Like, that's, like... all right, so we copied, and we have a mouse, and we have extra lands, or whatever. Like, here's the thing, don't get caught in this trap when deck building. And we do this purposely sometimes as creators, because we just got to make different decks and do stuff. But don't spend time trying to make bad cards good. Right? If a card is bad to mediocre, just let it be bad to mediocre sometimes. Like, can occasionally we do some fun, quirky things and we can get, like, Magic Christmas Land and the thing goes up? Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun. That's part of the creativity of Magic. But if you're talking about building something to do something consistently, like, you know, sometimes you just gotta let a thing be what it is. Is Wormlet still in standard? Yes. You can grow Wormlet with a lot of things, though. Like, there's a lot of things that just happen to be artifacts, or things that put a artifact token into play, or whatever, right? So Wormlet's already fine. Like, Wormlet still gets played in the, what do you call it? Like the Simic Cookies decks, right? That's already a thing, because you have all the creatures putting artifacts into play. You've got Ginger Brute, which happens to be an artifact. You've got the Agatha Soul Cauldron. There's also a whole pile of things, actually. That they can do a lot of things. So yeah, there's a bunch of things you can still do with Wormlet. So yeah, don't undersell the Wormlet anyway. Not with this, because this makes an enchantment, not an artifact. But just the thing. There's still one more to talk about, though. There's the white one, right? And this one's probably, I think, the most interesting. It's a 7 mana, so the most expensive of them. 6/6. It has impending 4. So the second, tied for the most expensive impending cost, right? Because the red one's also 4. But when it enters or attacks, you make 2/1 white insect creature tokens with flying. So you effectively get an additional 4/2. So you're getting 10 power, 7 toughness, or 8 toughness worth of creatures for 7 mana. 2 of them fly as 2/1s, right? Like, that's a lot of upside. But what I'm really envisioning for this card, which, by the way, some number of people reasonably believe this is worth a lot because this is selling for almost as much as the green one that got all the hype initially. You're having trouble finding these for under $13 to $15 right now. But this could be one of the best reanimator targets in the set. I think a lot of people looked at the demons and all that other stuff to do all the crazy things or whatever. But the best thing about this is, even if they kill it when you get it back, like you spend your resources, you pay your 4 or 5 mana, whatever tricky way you want to get out of the graveyard, like you still have 2/1s left. You know what I mean? Like, even if this dies, you don't get anything else from it. You get 2 bodies when you reanimate. You get 3 bodies when you reanimate, but you have 2 left if they kill the big one. And then there's a chance you can just do it again, right? If it's not exiled. So this, to me, makes the best reanimator target. Grave Titan, is that you? No, this is better. This is, I feel like this is better than Grave Titan when it does its thing because you're getting flyers. Right? Like, I think that's a huge difference here. Though also, I think Grave Titan costs a mana less, which made Grave Titan a little easier just to straight up play. The curves after Caretaker's Talent, the Anthem at the end of Caretakers might be good with flying tokens. Like, I don't even think you need that. Because again, if I'm doing tokens and Caretaker's Talent, whatever, I can just build a more efficient deck. Like, I wouldn't even consider playing this in that deck. Because there's just more cheap, efficient things that allow you to keep, like, leveling up your talents and all that other stuff. Right? You probably don't even... I mean, the decks have already shown they don't even need this. But if I'm reanimating, this is an amazing target. Because one of the downsides to reanimator stuff is like, well, you get your thing, but then they kill it before it really gets to do what it's going to do, right? But if you get 2 extra things to leave behind, well, now you can blow one of your reanimator spells early just to buy time to have some chump blockers or whatever, and then still do whatever else you're going to do. Another interesting thing to consider is that this and the Black Overlord could be played in the same deck as your 8 reanimator targets. You know what I mean? Like, that's not crazy. It's just to be like, all right, the first one you get, the black one, you're loading the graveyard, making sure you have some stuff there. And then now you're just doing your regular removal, board sweepers, whatever it is you're going to do. Then maybe you play this for 4 at one point, so you get a couple of bodies. And then now you're set, right? Because now you got stuff in the graveyard, you got your reanimator stuff in hand, you got a thing on board that's eventually going to make more bodies. Like, that's probably a real deck. I mean, it sounds a little crazy, but you're going to have some of the best reanimator targets. Like, you know what I mean? Now, don't get me wrong. Like, the demons obviously make good targets, especially the new one, the 9/9 or whatever that flies. And, you know, like, sure, you're probably still going to play one of those in there somewhere. Maybe you don't even play 4 of each of the Overlords. Maybe you're playing like 3 and 3 or something or whatever. But these are quality targets for those decks. So really worth considering in that regard. Straight up, do I think it's better than the other ones? I don't know. But I do think in the decks that want it, they're going to really want it. And I think that's good enough. What if you flip Invasion of Amonkhet and copy this? That's kind of cool. I don't have a problem with that. Hell, you can play the Black-White Invasion as your reanimator spell. And just get one of these out of the graveyard into play. Right? Like, that's straight up. Like, nothing wrong with that. Is Viper a good enough reanimator target? You mean the one that you have to sacrifice stuff to? This guy? Rottenmouth Viper? Because if so, my answer is hell nah. Like, not even nah, but Hell nah. Like, this, yeah, like, this isn't even close to good enough. Like, if you're asking me, would I rather have a Viper or, like, the White Titan? Or whatever, the Overlord? I would take the White Overlord all day, every day. Because the thing we were just talking about, right? If your opponent has a removal spell, you spend all your resources and basically got nothing out the Viper. Like, they either discarded something or lost 4 life. Like, okay, that's fine. Whatever. But that's the most you're getting out of it. Right? Just not enough. Hell, today's video that went up, my opponent got a Viper, and then we dealt with it, and then they got a second Viper. Not only did they get a second Viper, they got to attack with it an additional time, and I even misplayed where I could have killed it and still beat them. Right? So, not saying the Viper's trash, but for the number of people I see trying to shove Viper into decks, it is a highly beatable card for its cost. And in a lot of those scenarios, if Viper is something else, I probably lose. You know, I think that's a real thing that people don't consider sometimes. Like, I think the Viper is a fun card, don't get me wrong, and there's a lot of ways you can get it cheap and do all that fun stuff, but I see way too many decks trying to shove Vipers in their list, and then they're losing, and then they don't understand. And I'm like, well, Viper's just not the end-all, be-all. It's a fun card, don't get me wrong, totally fun, but yeah, if I'm looking at reanimator targets, this isn't even in the top 20. It might be in the 20. That's probably an overstatement. It may not be in the top 10, but it's probably in the top 20. Because again, you still have everything that flies, right? Or cards just to straight up play over it, right? So you still have anything that flies, anything that has immediate impact to kill things, maybe give negatives to the board, makes extra tokens. Like, there's a whole bunch of other abilities I'm looking for when I'm reanimating something, other than just getting me a 6/6 on the ground. Now, admittedly, this isn't just a 6/6 on the ground. This is a 6/6 on the ground that often will be an additional 4 damage. So it's not nothing. But once it gets dealt with, you're kind of back to square one and doing everything over again, right? Whereas even the red one, you probably played it, or red Overlord, and you like killed a creature. So there's one less threat coming after you if your thing dies, right? So, you know, think about all the stuff we reanimated before, like Olivia Voldaren or whatever, like got another creature out of the graveyard when it attacks. You were getting, what was it? Troxel, right? The 7/7 that was giving all your opponent stuff minuses and getting you tokens or whatever, right? Like, we were getting the Titan of Industry that could kill an artifact or enchantment or make another body or gain life, right? So, like, everything you want to reanimate you want it to have almost immediate significant impact to change the board and be hard to deal with. And I just don't think Viper checks enough of those boxes if you're trying to reanimate stuff. You know? People are currently reanimating this as a deck finisher. I mean, I guess. If you want to go ahead and, like, if you're playing a version that plays, like, the red enchantment, you can sacrifice and give stuff haste or whatever, and, like, try to get 3 triggers off of it, like 1 when it enters, 2 when it attacks, and like, okay, if you're building around that, that's somewhat reasonable at least. But the problem is if you don't finish your opponent, I don't know what happens. But still an option. Jonathan Rowe left a $10 super chat on YouTube. Thank you so much. You know what? I don't even know why. Like, hold on a second. I should have notifications going off here. I feel like I'm missing some of y'all for some reason. Let me check some things. Here we go. We should be rocking and rolling now. So if some of y'all subscribed or liked or whatever on some things and I didn't get you, I apologize. Some of my stuff wasn't on and functioning properly. So I'm going to give some love to those of you that did. So, thank you, if you have. All right. Back to where we were. Lion says, people are using the reanimation spell that copies the Viper too. Copies the Viper? What would that even be? Return creature copy? Is that text on a thing? Oh, this thing. You're talking about this? Where you like gift a card, and then if it was promised it isn't legendary creature token, that's a copy. Yeah, I've had this played against me, and I literally was just like, okay. Like, I don't even know, like, don't be wrong, again, good. And if I'm playing the future Reanimator deck, I am definitely playing this with the Overlords. Like, my Reanimator cards of choice are probably this and the black-white battle. It's probably what I'm doing. Because getting those things with an extra copy, like, you get the white Overlord and you get 4 2/3s or 2/1s in the air. Hell yeah. Right? Like I'm all over that. Just copy Carnosaur with that, to be fair, and get 2 free cards. Yeah, that's reasonable. Well, yeah, like, sweepers are always going to be a thing, but, like, your opponent doesn't always have it. Or when they do, you still have creature lands, you have artifacts or enchantments that are doing things. Like, you don't put everything on just the creature that you're investing in. Also, with the Overlords, you can play one impending, keep doing your business for a turn or two, your opponent has to deal with those. Then when a sweeper goes off, you have your backups, right? That's another thing. Jukai Naturalist from Neon Dynasty reduces enchantments that might be a curve. Yep, but those will not be in standard. Though there is a new one that's a blue-white creature that does the same thing. So that's possible. Hey, thanks for subscribing. That was cool. So now my notifications are on because now I see them and hear them. So things are working as intended now. That's fantastic. Though, let me... Gonna make a quick adjustment here on a couple of small things while I have a second. That'll work. Let me move this out of the way. Yeah, that'll work. All right. So now we're all set. You're excited for Self-Mill Demonic Tutor. That one, I'm curious about. Because part of me says, if I'm playing something like Delirium, let me put search library card from the latest set. This thing. Demonic Council. You can search your library for a demon, reveal it, put it in your hand, or if you have Delirium, you can go search for any card. You still have to account for the Delirium to make this worth it. And while getting 4 different card types in the art doesn't necessarily seem difficult, it doesn't necessarily happen early, right? It may not happen until turn 5 or turn 6 or whatever sometimes, unless your goal is forcing stuff into the graveyard, obviously. But if you're not doing that, I don't know how much you want to play this card. And there's situations where we already have stuff like, what is it? The Search the Bog or whatever that thing is, right? Like, it's 2 mana, and let's say on like turn 4 or 5, you can already look at like the top 10 cards anyway. Not saying your card you want is always in your top 10, but 2 mana to go search the top 10 is almost like getting to search for the card you want when you're playing 3 or 4 copies of the thing, right? So that's you know, I have to question, like, how much better is it than that? Like, also, you have, what is it? Analyze the Pollen, I think is the card. This thing. Now, again, you have to evidence 8, but you search your library for a creature card or a land card. So, if you're going to be playing something that cares about going to search for a creature, this might be more consistent than the other thing, even if you're playing Delirium, because you just go get rid of some stuff and then go get it, right? So, like, that's reasonable as well. Now, if you want to go get something that's not a creature, then obviously Analyze the Pollen isn't as good. But, again, I don't hate the other card, and once you're later in the game, then every one you draw is just like 2 mana, go get the card you want, right? So I think it's playable, but I think everybody's initial reaction of, oh my god, like it's a demonic tutor, and it's like, is it though? Right? It's kind of a demonic tutor. I mean, I also don't worry about these types of cards because I remember when we were able to play, what was it, the 4-mana tutor that just goes and gets anything? Which, don't be wrong, 4-mana, 2-mana, not the same thing. But you can more consistently play it and go get what you want than this could. And those didn't crazily change the format or whatever, so this is probably, I mean, it's playable for sure. And if you're playing a deck that already plays demons and stuff, then like obviously you play this because it doesn't even hurt you. But yeah, it seems fine. Where do I see the meta and standard going from here? Which archetypes are the strongest in Duskmourn? We can't answer that. We have no idea. like unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball to give you that answer. Do I think the new archetypes are playable? My initial thought is yes, rooms for multiple things. Yes, enchantments for multiple things. Do they need to be just rooms or just enchantments? Not necessarily. I think we need to not discount the fact that glimmers are also enchantment creatures. I think that's very important. There's a fair amount of cards that are artifacts that make an additional token, making a glimmer or something. So, like, those could end up being playable as well for things that need to sacrifice multiple things or whatnot. Do I think the 2/2 face down things are a thing? Maybe. We have to do the deep dive and see how many old things we can combine with that to make it worthwhile. No, I just want to play it in Sultai, Self-Mill, Jace. Sure. I mean, if you want to play this in that, that's fine. I mean, again, like I always have the question, like, what's the payoff that we're worried about not being able to get otherwise or whatever? But if it's there, go for it. Have you already previewed the turn 2 kill red leyline? I'm not okay. Here's the thing. I'm not as excited about it. Hey, thanks for that. Let me bring it up here. This one, Leyline of Resonance, right? And here's the reason I'm not as excited about this. Like, if the red decks are already good, whether we're talking mono red, red black, red green, whatever, right? The hyper aggro decks. If they're already good, why do we need this card? Right? If we're saying those decks can already win on turn 3 on the draw if the opponent doesn't interact with them, or turn 4 fairly consistently if they don't have a couple of things, why does it need this card? Because here's the problem. If you're building around this, you need to play 4 of these, right? If it's super specific to what you're trying to do. Well, you don't want to draw it in multiples, first off, right? And you want to draw it in your opening hand, because drawing it after turn 1 for those decks is trash. Because they barely play enough mana to get to like 3 mana sometimes. So this does next to nothing after the opening hand. So then the question becomes, all right, let's say you get it. You do your thing. And they still have like a cut down. Or they went first and have any number of 2-mana removal spells. You've now invested an extra card and wasted whatever you initially targeted to target your creature. So you're down at least 1 land, at least 1 creature, at least 1 spell, at least the ley line. Probably something else, because you probably played another land on turn 2. So you're down 5 of the 8 cards you've already seen. Right? Like, is this worth it? Because at that point, if your opponent stabilizes, like, it doesn't even matter if this card's even on the battlefield, hardly. You know what I mean? Because you're down to just going to be like a singular threat. Now, will people lose to this? Absolutely. Like, somebody's going to high roll some, 15, 20% of the time, and it's going to do its thing and whatever. But do those decks even need this? Not really. I mostly look at cards like this, and I start thinking about, like, what other decks that are willing to play a turn 5 game, a turn 6 game, can use something like this? Right? That's what I start thinking about. Hey, y'all are coming through with the super chats today. Thank you so much. That one's from Philip Jackson over on the YouTubes. Yeah, I don't again, I'm not going to say this isn't good and everybody likes trying to do the crazy thing. But like understand this. Remember, for those of you that can remember back to, I guess it would have been 2019, 2020 standard, where we had Kaldheim, there were the silly decks doing the thing with Tybalt, right? The flip one. Could those things win on turn 2 or 3 pretty consistently? Like, no, but could they win on 2 or 3? Yes. And then sometimes, many times, they just died to their own draws, right? Because they got the wrong card at the wrong time, or when they were, whatever the ability was, where you were like milling to get the spell you wanted, but it wasn't the right spell or whatever, right? So like, they more just nerfed it because it was getting annoying, right? Because they just didn't want to see a bunch of like 2 or 3 turn games where the deck's doing what it's doing and it just peters out and then nobody had any fun with it, right? That's the only real reason. But the deck wasn't like crazy format dominant, and this feels even more fragile than that. But like, I don't know, maybe people decide the deck's still fine for the most part. You take a bunch of stuff that's 4 ofs and you turn them to 3s, and then you insert 4 ley lines, and then you just try to high roll. Right? Like maybe that's good enough. I don't know. But I don't know. I'd also question like, and I haven't even remotely done the math on this, but I would question how many of the games where you high rolled would you have still won if the ley line was one of the other cards it replaced? I would venture to guess that math is north of 50%. Because if your opponent is already able to interact with 1 or 2 things, a lot of times you kill those decks anyway, right? You have an early like deal 2 to a thing, you destroy another creature, and then they're sitting with a bunch of stuff that targets their creatures and no creatures. Or they get one later, but you don't care because you've already gained life, or you have another removal spell or whatever, right? That's how a lot of those games end. So that's the part I would try to figure out. Like, is this changing the win percentage of those decks any significant number? Or are you already just winning games you would already win just like a turn faster when you high roll? Because that's what it feels like. I could be totally wrong, but I'm not really seeing where this... Now, I will say this. If the red decks or the red aggro-based decks, whatever, were more often winning on turns like 5... and then adding Leyline says, hey, you have a chance to win on turn 2, but it's increasing it to a turn 3 a lot. Then I would say, like, yeah, this is changing those decks pretty significantly. But the thing is, if their current high roll wins are already on 3 anyway, you know, and for a fair amount of time. But again, the same situation, that if you have any amount of interaction, then it almost just doesn't matter. Whether they have Leyline or not, the results are usually the same. So, I'm probably, I mean, I say that. I may feature it one time just to show it and do the math or whatever, but it's not going to be on my top list of decks to build with right out of the gate, I don't think. I think the creature of 3 mana in red that doesn't let you gain life for the rest of the game, if dealt damage, is worse than the Leyline. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I agree with that. We'll bring it up though. It's a 3/3 or whatever, right? It's red. I don't remember. It's like a spirit or something. I don't remember the name of it. I can bring it up by power toughness in the set. Power equal to 3. And toughness equal to 3. And it's in Duskmourn. So that'll get us where we want to go. Yeah, this guy. Screaming Nemesis. Also, Gabriel on YouTube says, I'm hoping we get a card similar to Illuminator Virtuoso in standard heroic decks. You probably won't see that again. Dinner for Pooh. Hey, I haven't seen you in a bit. welcome. Rob says, just recently found your channel and have really been enjoying the content. Do you do live streams often? No, right now they're like a couple of times a month. I might be increasing them to like one a week, but it kind of just depends on how they fall on my schedule. All right, so Screaming Nemesis is a 3-mana 2/2. It's a spirit, has haste. Whenever it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any other target. If a player is dealt damage this way, they can't gain life for the rest of the game. The question is this better or worse than the Leyline for the red decks? I personally think... Now, I will say this. I don't think the red decks need either one of them. I'll start out saying that. But if I were going to put one of them in, I'm putting this one in. For multiple reasons. First off, we've been talking about playing standard, going to your local store, playing standard, stored championships, all that stuff, right? This is a great sideboard card. Like, a fantastic sideboard card. Because, like, your opponent can't even block it without suffering the effects of the card to gain life, right? That means Biza is no longer really a threat to you, right? The lifelink stuff your opponent has won't even matter, right? Like, that is a real thing. And it has the upside of the ability that even if, like, it makes blocking so much worse for your opponent, right? Because even if you throw like, if you try to trade straight up with this, like, you can't even have, like, a 4 or 5 toughness thing block this or something else. Like, you can't block with 2 things without losing multiple creatures most of the time. Right? Because if you're blocking with small creatures, obviously you're just going to die. If you're blocking with bigger creatures, you might get their stuff, but they're going to get your stuff too. If they choose not to hit you so that you can't gain life. Right? Like, I think this is actually reasonable. Like, and if I was sideboarding, like I said, I would definitely sideboard this before I play the other stuff. Hell, and to be honest, even further, if you're playing Commander, this card's infinitely better than the Leyline. Like, you know how much life gain can go on in a game of Commander? Like this, you just shut that down entirely. So, like, yeah, I'm a bigger fan. Hell, and people seem to agree. This card is pre-ordering for way more than the Leyline. So, yeah, I don't know if the red decks need either one of the cards, at least currently in Standard. I don't think they need either one. However, if I were going to play one, probably out of the gate would be Screaming Nemesis for me. For sure, I'm sideboarding Screaming Nemesis. I would even argue that Screaming Nemesis has some value in, like, the haste-based red-green decks that we played before with Samet and whatever, right? Like, that's a possibility because it's another haste creature. It can help you take down a bigger body, keep your opponent from gaining life. Hell, you want to deal with Shieldred's life gain? You just attack with Screaming Nemesis. Then what do? Right? Even if they block with Shieldred, you either get to kill Shieldred or they never get to gain life again. Either or. If they block with something else, then you're like, great. Cool. They block with, I don't know, let's say their Preacher, right? Since Preacher has Death Touch. All right, they get to kill this. They still take 2. And then now they don't get to gain life off their Preacher or future Shieldred. Right? Like, there's a real thing here. Seriously. That with Glissa would be funny. Big come at me, bro energy. Yeah, kinda. I mean, that's threatening. I mean, think about it. Even Glissa, right? They could block a Glissa or block with Glissa and just kill Glissa, and it doesn't even matter. Right? Like, this card's actually pretty good. Actually, like, annoyingly good. So, yeah, I wouldn't undersell this card. But again, I don't think the red decks need either one of these cards. I really don't. This or the Leyline. But if I was going to play one, I'm probably going with Screaming Nemesis. Let's see. Darren Fafu says he recently moved to the East Coast, Haven't had time for streams or Magic, sadly. Enjoying getting back into it. Well, welcome back. Galgron on Twitch says, nah, most life gain decks will either just destroy it, that, or exile it. But that's the thing, Galgron. Like, they still have to deal with your other stuff, right? Those turn 1 mice, the turn 1 monastery mentor, whatever, right? And then this shows up, right? You didn't not remove any of those other things. You didn't not remove a slick shot, whatever. So, like, they still have to deal with a lot of things. And they can't just not deal with this. Because, like, let's say they kill a thing, and then you're like, okay, well, turn 3, I'm just going to tackle Screaming Nemesis. Like, you either have to have another removal, or hope that, I don't even know. You have to have another removal. Because otherwise, you're still not getting to gain life the rest of the game. Right? Because, sure, you can have a sweeper next turn or whatever, but now you've already been hit because it has haste. So, like, yeah, this is a real thing. This is actually a real card. In Commander, you can self-shock to playfully push it to the target. That's true. You could. You could ping your own thing and just say, like, boom, you can't gain life, you can't gain life, you can't gain life. Like, that is real. Fight spells with it are also a nice option. Yeah, possibly. Like, I could see that. I think more a big red burn deck than an aggro, but still a good in aggro. Yeah, that's possible. Mid-range Grixis deck would use this as a side. Would I use it as a side? Oh, if you're saying if you have a mid-range Grixis deck, could you use this as a sideboard card? It would depend on the deck. Like if I'm doing aggro-y things in those colors, I don't know what that would look like right now, then sure. But most Grixis stuff I know is not really trying to do a bunch of attacky things, and they don't really care if you gain some amount of life. So, like, in those decks, I probably wouldn't. Like, again, if something exists where life total significantly matters and whatever, then, like, yeah, sure, go ahead, sideboard it. But for most things I can think of how Grixis plays, which is often, like, some removal, I don't know, like, Shieldred or whatever, a couple of Planeswalkers, but, like, if your opponent gains like 8 or 9 life during the game, you don't care that much. You know what I mean? It's not the strategy you're worried about. Like, you're eventually going to get there one way or the other. But if there was an aggro-y thing, yeah. Honestly, if you're playing aggro of anything with red, and, well, I say that, and the combination of some number of cards in the format gain life, right? If there's a lot of Lightning Helixes and Bizas and whatever, like, okay, then yeah, this makes sense to play. But here's another fun thing, right? It does just take down creatures bigger than it. That's the other thing, right? Your opponent can't ever even safely block if they want to protect like their 4/4 or 5/5. Because they can just pick it off. Personally, I think the most breakable cards will be the Impending Horrors. I don't even think they're breakable. I think they're good, but I think they're fine. Is DSK, so I don't even know what DSK is. By the way, hello, Matt, on YouTube. Chef to Chief said, Nemesis turns a Witchstalker Frenzy into a cheap lava axe. Kinda. Like, things that don't normally hit your opponent can now hit your opponent. And that's something to consider as well, right? Like, some spells we don't play because you can't finish your opponent with them, right? They only hit creatures or they only hit planeswalkers or whatever. But if they do that and you have Screaming Nemesis, you're like, okay, take another 2 damage, take another 4 damage, right? Like, that's a real thing. Oh, you meant the set name Duskmourn, DSK. Yes, that is the abbreviation for the set. I think every set's supposed to be good. That's how Wizards make money. Like, that's a weird question. Like, I mean, if cards aren't good or playable, then they don't sell Magic cards. That's kind of the name of the game. So, do I think the set? Yeah, the set has a lot of good cards in it. I don't know if it's power inflation. People worry about, cards being overpowered. Like, the thing is, this is one of the reasons they do try to create new designs and mechanics and whatever, right? So there's, or even cards that work well with older cards, because that encourages people to obviously buy more Magic, right? Because at some point, you can't just have infinite power escalation set after set, right? Power creep or whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, you also need cards to be useful and interesting, right? If they don't replace other cards or they don't elevate other cards, then like what's the point of somebody buying them, right? They're just different. So when you're able to do stuff like, let's talk about like Manifest Dread as an example, right? Now you made kind of a new mechanic that does something interesting, could work with graveyard stuff, could work with, you know, ETB creature stuff, but also now works with cards from a couple of your other recent standard sets. So it elevated a bunch of stuff so people are at least interested in it, right? But then we made a mechanic that cares about enchantments coming into the battlefield. That's a thing we've had before. People who like those can now play these, right? And they're decent on their own, even within their self-contained set. So I think it's actually pretty cool that that's a thing that we can at least consider. And I don't think it makes the set good, bad, overpowered, underpowered. I think it's just different. But are there good cards in here? Absolutely. But here's the thing I think we should talk about, right? Because people forget how recently we were having these conversations about Standard, right? There was the real concern that Standard was going to be too strong and too many cards weren't going to get played because it was going to be a 3-year Standard and it's going to be all this, right? But then as we went through it all, turns out Standard got better and we're seeing more cards played, right? Which is counterintuitive to what we thought. Even we're like, oh, well, the later stuff isn't going to get played because the newer stuff's going to be better. And it's like, no, there's stuff. There's like, most decks now have cards from like 6 different sets, if not more, right? So Standard is doing what it's meant to do, even with us having more cards and technically subsequent like power creep on cards or whatever, right? So I don't think there's any concern to think that Duskmourn will be any different. I think we're checking all the right boxes we need to be checking. I think we're going to have a variety of new decks pop up. I think it's more than fine. The Valiant Mouse, Red Mouse running laps. I mean, it's good. Right? I don't know if I'd say it's running laps. That feels a bit overstated. Is Eerie going to be better used with Calyx? Depends. I mean, the best card for them is a blue card that you get to draw when it enters the battlefield. So, I mean, are you playing Bant to make use of Calyx and all the good stuff? Like, maybe. Oh, I think my neighbor just started doing yard work. What am I everything. Like, I'm the worst to ask about most excited thing to play from set. I usually just lie and make up a card. Like, seriously. Like, I'm a weirdo because, like, I'd rather talk about specifics if somebody has, like, a card question or whatever, because I mean, there's a very few things in life I have, like, favorites of. Like, I'm one of those weirdos that just, like, I just enjoy a lot of things. So, you know, when people want, like, the hot take thing, it's, like, a weird thing for me. Like, honestly, even doing the videos of, like, it took me forever to come around to doing the, like, here's some cards that you can confidently consider playing and ones you shouldn't, right? Like, because everybody wants me to say the words, like, tell me what to craft and tell me what not to craft on Arena. But the reality is that answer isn't, like, a binary yes-no answer, right? Like, there's so many levels as to why a thing could be worth it and why a thing could not be worth it. So I stayed away from doing that. This last set I did it because, and I'm taking a whole different route on it, is basically, all right, done the research, built some decks, we played in the streamer event, we've seen these results, here's what worked, here's what didn't, here's what I'm going to tell you based on what we know. Right? And now I feel confidently at least giving you that answer on based on these facts. And notice when I made the video, I tried to say, here's why I think this, here's what worked, here's what I saw, here's what didn't work, here's what I saw, right? More than just, I led with the like, cards is your crafts, cards you shouldn't craft, because I know it's what the words people want to hear. But once you're actually watching, I'm saying like, hey, here's why you should or shouldn't. And that to me has more value other than, I think this card's good for these reasons, you should go craft it. I think this card's crap for these reasons, you should go craft it. Or not go craft it, right? Which a lot of people do, and that gets a lot of clicks, and I understand. I get it. But I don't feel good doing that type of stuff. I just never have. So now that I have a format that works and I have a way to justify it, I feel better making those assumptions, but those videos probably won't be coming out till next Friday. So there's that. Is that Megany? Megony? Meegoeny? Mego New York? I don't know what you're saying there. But either way, on Twitch, says, I've been a little confused. If the top 2 cards are non-creature when you manifest Dread, just mill 2 and you don't get a 2. No, you still get a 2/2. Just one of your 2/2s is going to be a land and doesn't do anything. Right? So you put a creature in the graveyard, or a card in the graveyard, and you turn one and have a 2/2 face down creature. You will always know that, but your opponent won't. Right? And that becomes the thing on if they even want to waste a removal card on it, worried about you turning it face up or whatever. Oh yeah, we already had that handled. So yeah, it's a tough thing, right? Because I get it. People want help. They want direction. Whether we like it or not as creators, we're looked at in a lot of ways as subject matter experts for people, right? Whatever group of creators you follow that you like or whatever. So knowing that, I try to be real careful with my words. Because I don't want people making... Like, I hate people making serious personal or financial decisions when I don't know their personal situation. And I know people are looking for those words to help them make those decisions. So you just have to be real careful. Like, and I do take that into consideration before all the content that I put out. Like, just because of that. Supples on YouTube says, what's the land math to get the new rare lands to work consistently? Oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine. I don't think they're worth playing, personally. I don't even know if I would spend time trying to make them work. But I will bring them up here so people know what we're talking about. But I'm assuming you're talking about the ones that you have to have 13 life or whatever. I'll just put 13 in the text, so I'm sure that'll come up. All right, these guys, the 10 lands, I'll just pick one. We'll go with this one. So, Bleeding Woods enters tapped unless a player has 13 or less life. I think my problem here is... Oh, no, this isn't the rare one. These are the other ones. You're talking about the 2 mana. Okay, these I would never play. You're talking about the rare ones. All right, that'll actually make for a much better conversation. Because those others, like I said, I don't think I'd even really consider playing. Let's just look at the ones from Duskmourn. One of these. There we go. These. That just are the land they are, but then you can tap to activate only if you control a swamp or a mountain. I don't think you need... Here's what I would say. I don't know if the math is that important to make sure you can use these as other things, as much as figuring out either A, how many basics your deck can support, or how many of the Surveil lands your deck can support. I think those are the 2 more important factors, because you're going to need some amount of those to justify playing this. Right? Because these are always just going to be, like, this could replace a swamp and just be what it is. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to play 8 swamps, you could play 4 of these and 4 swamps. And then, occasionally, it'll just make the other mana. And that's fine, right? So if you're playing enough basics, one way or the other, then you just play these and it doesn't even matter. If you're playing some number of these Surveil lands because you're already doing, I don't know, trying to reach Delirium or something or whatever. All right, cool. Then you can go ahead and play some of these and they'll just be multi-lands. But if you need, let's say you're playing lizards, right? Because that's a good Rakdos aggro deck. You need as many options to have red or black early or whatever, right? Like this isn't necessarily going to guarantee that. So you have to really decide, is this worth playing in that type of deck? Right? Because I don't know how many even basics they play right now. But they're playing some number of creature lands, some number of the fast lands. Probably, I'm trying to think what other lands they're playing in there. Like, they might have enough basics, right? Because they're playing, whatever the land that you can go search for a basic, right? Fable Passage. So, like, maybe you play a couple of each of these, right? Because, again, you're already playing enough basics to justify the Fable Passage, which I'm assuming is, like, 4 to 8. If you are, then, like, maybe you can get away with playing a couple of these. Again, but you're probably also replacing a swamp or a mountain that's reducing the number of basics you have. So you're almost looking at them more as being a swamp or being a mountain that occasionally just taps for another color. So yeah, so I don't know if there's a perfect, because the problem is, like I said, it's not even just the math on how many other types you need to have. It's also the math on, does that deck, can that deck get away with playing some number of basics? And is the deck okay if a significant amount of time this isn't producing the other color? Right? That's the other option. Because if you're playing decks that are fast and they need to have access to multiple colors however they need it, and especially if you're playing a 3-color deck, that becomes a bit of a bigger problem. Like, I don't know if this does everything for us. Now, there's a weird world where if you're playing the green Overlord, it makes a land that counts as every land type, so then you're all good to go, right? So that's a thing. So, like, that's something to consider. The lands look like an upgrade on a basic land with potential upside. Yeah, probably. But again, like I said, it's how many basics are you playing, and how many other, like, swamps or mountains or, you know, appropriate land types do you have in the deck? Because then you also have the issue of, like, if you're playing Fable Passages, it's like, okay, when are you playing a Fable Passage? When are you playing this? To be able to get your basic, to be able to get the other colors. And then you still have enough basics that if you've used a Fable Passage and your opponent has destroyed one of your non-basics, you can still go search for a basic later. If that matters. Like, it may not matter to your deck. For 2-color decks, this was needed replacement for slow lands. Quite possibly. I go through the standard pool and find there are only one green-black card called Crow Whipcracker, which deals with the 5-color land that the green Overlord produces. And surprisingly, it's an insect assassin. Do you think it would be played in the future? I played it in an assassin deck. It was fine. Am I worried about killing a land, though, token with it? Not really. I think that's way too much focus on one card. I don't think that's how you need to approach the format. Like, if that deck ends up, or that card ends up being played a ton, and the card just happens to work out for you, sure, that's fine. But other than that, I wouldn't worry about it too much. And I'm sure there's also random cards that, like, do something to a token or whatever that possibly affect it. There's occasionally cards that still destroy land even though they cost a lot if you're really worried about it. But, like, your opponent just has a multicolor land. Like, do we care that much? Like, you can play a ton of ramp spells right now and just get another land. That effectively is the same thing because they already have 4 or 5 lands anyway. Like, do we really care that they have one? Not terribly. You know what I mean? Like, it's an odd thing to focus on. That's all I'm saying. Like, there's probably better things you should worry about killing. When that rare land cycle is done, they feel like great lands when you're only splashing 2 or 3 of another color. Yeah, probably. I don't think there'd be anything wrong with that. So glad those 13 are common. That's the only place they could be. They're borderline unplayable for a lot of decks. Like, the reason I say that is, think about all the tap lands you have access to. Hell, even in standard, we have lands where you gain life, we have lands where you deal damage, we have lands where you surveil, we have lands that become creatures, right? Like, when are you ever going to need to play the 13 life lands? Like, literally never. Right? If I'm doing something with aggro and I'm on a budget, I'd rather just deal damage. If I'm doing something that cares about life gain or control or whatever and I'm on a budget, I'd rather just gain life. If I'm worried about sweepers, I'd rather just play the creature lands. You know, if I'm doing delirium, I'd rather just, just play the surveil lands. Right? Like, there's no spot where I want to play the 13 life lands. They're just not. Like, in limited, late in the game, it's awesome. You draw a land that's untapped, that's multiple colors, and like that's cool. But yeah, I don't know. I can't. The 13 land thing it doesn't make sense for me. It's just not, it's not good enough, right? And I saw it and I thought, oh, this is a cool idea because it's Duskmourn and 13 and that makes sense. But like, that's kind of like as far as my thought went, right? I'm probably never playing these. Actually, here's an interesting thing though, and I didn't check this, which I don't know. Oh, they're over here. I can click one of these. I was wondering if they got really crafty and just stuck 13 things or something in every piece of the artwork. But it doesn't look like they did. I don't know why I just had that thought of like, that could be like, I don't know, there are like 13 circles in this thing. Like maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, there's way more than 13. So yeah, that's not it. It was just a random thought I had. I was like, oh, that'd be kind of funny. But no, it looks like they didn't. The only cool thing about the 13 lands is the flavor tech. Yeah, that's exactly it. The flavor on them are great. Like, they are well-designed cards. But I don't know. Like, if you were playing... Oh... whatever, like the deck in Modern, where you need to like lose life to play the guy that's like 13, but smaller, equal to your life total, whatever that thing is, right? Maybe since you're already damaging yourself a bunch and you want to splash a color, you could play the other one. But like, yeah, Dash Shadow, that's what I was thinking. Like, that's probably it, but there's no... Other than that, there's no other reason to play it. I think the upside is that late game, they're not a tap when you're desperate. But what would you need on, let's say, turn 9 that you draw one of these and it's untapped versus a tap land? Like, if you don't need the mana that exact turn, they're literally worse than every other tap land you're going to play. Like, genuinely. Unless you absolutely need the mana on that exact turn, every turn after that, they're worse than every other tap land you could play. So, on a, like... expected value curve, you're going to want those other lands pretty much every time over wanting the 13 life lands. Like, that's the issue I have with it. Like, there's just not enough. Not enough times that it's going to come up that's going to matter. Like, I mean, I guess if the whole format is like super hyper aggro red based stuff, then sure, you have another untapped land on like turn 3. But then that's also assuming you didn't have any removal or whatever, and you're already at like 6 or 8, you're probably close to dead anyway. So you probably don't want to take that gamble. Or Pauper, but again, even in Pauper, I don't want it, because there's a ton of tap lands over the years that are at common. Like, aren't the deserts and stuff common as well, where you can deal damage, or the other ones where you gain life or whatever? Like, again, I'm not wanting to play the 13 life lands. Like, again, limited, absolutely, because you just want multi-lands to make it easier to cast your stuff, and you're going to play them all day, and they're totally worth playing. For constructed, maybe 1 or 2 very corner case situations I can consider where I would even think about it. But in most cases, I'm not wanting to touch those. I would recommend not playing them. They will definitely make my list of cards to not bother worrying about. Even on a budget, there are just better common lands we can play right now. Probably even uncommon lands if I go look. But yeah, we just have better options. There's no need to consider those. Like I said, from a flavor and design standpoint, great. No complaints about them. But as far as actual playability, very, very, very low. And I don't even know if like if there's another way you could have done this to make it worth it. Like based on if your life total is already a certain number or whatever, because 13's at least high enough that you still care and are playing the game, you know? Like it can't be lower than that, but it also can't be higher than that because then you might as well just have it be an untapped land. So, yeah. I would say if there was a case, like if these had been, if they also had the basic land types on them, then maybe. Because then there would be like a strategic situation on like playing these alongside the rare lands that care about you having other land types or whatever. And then like some number of times these would be untapped and where, okay, then there's more upside to this, right? Or cards that let you fetch a basic land type or whatever, right? Like that could be a thing. But as is, I just can't see why you'd really play them. Galgron says, in Standard, maybe a corner place in Modern up totally not worth the cardboard to print on. Yeah, not even that. Like literally, like we were talking about, maybe some like 2-colored Death Shadow whatever type of thing might be the only spot you're looking to play these. Otherwise, I can't imagine why you want to play them. Victor Mai on YouTube says, I'll play those Shadowlands in Limited for sure. Well, yeah, I don't like in Limited. Sure, anything goes, right? I many times have played multicolor tap lands in Limited just to make sure you have access to colors regularly. So that's a whole different thing. But we're talking about constructed, and it's all about efficiency and hitting your colors on time and all this stuff. Like you just can't. You just can't justify it. Even within Standard itself. Like, here's what's so crazy. Even if it wasn't a 3-year Standard, we would still have multiple better tapped lands that we could play. Right? At multiple rarities, even. So it's like, it's still, even if we only had a 2-year Standard, we wouldn't play this. So this isn't even a victim of like, oh, this is cool, but because Standard's so big, we're not going to play it. It's just like, no, if we literally just still had 2-year Standard, we still wouldn't be playing these cards. Because we would still have the deserts, we would still have the Surveil lands at a minimum. And the Surveil lands work with the new lands because they have the actual basic land types on them. And I think we would still have a gain life land. So, like, there'd be no reason to play these. Still. So, yeah. Even for budget considerations, they're just better cards. There's better cards that actually do something with the decks that you're trying, the deck strategy that you're trying to build. I think that's the problem. Yeah, the rare ones I actually think are playable, though. I mean, back to the original question, that was like 10 minutes ago. But, like, these are actually playable. Even if you just replace one of your regular basics with this, knowing you still have some other number of basics in the deck. Occasionally, this is just a multi-land. Still comes into play untapped. Always gets you the color you're expecting it to give you. Totally reasonable. Would I go crazy with them right off the bat? Maybe not. But if your deck has any number of other basics and you're willing to just replace a couple of them with this, then like, yeah, this is fine. I think them missing a land type is the difference. They'd be somewhat considered playable. Yeah, well, that's the thing, though, right? If we're talking about those other ones, they'd literally be considered. And that's what I'm saying, like, at best. We're still not even saying we would play them guaranteed. It's just like, if they had each basic land type on it, we would at least think about it. And I still don't even think that makes them playable because, again, they don't do anything. Like, you know what I mean? Like we have other tap lands that all do stuff that are significant. And I think that's the problem. Which commander deck is the best? Don't even know. Haven't even looked at them yet. I've literally looked at maybe like 5 of the commander cards. And I know people are like, but you're on the commander advisory group. I'm like, yeah, I have a schedule of things too. And I eventually would get around to it. Like, it's not a super high priority. But here's the thing too. I want to be real on this front too. Because, again, we were just talking about this. People come to creators for us to give an opinion so you can go make life decisions, personal decisions, financial decisions based on our feedback. I try to be careful about that, even when we're talking about best cards, best commander decks, whatever, because there are way more factors other than I think this deck is good. I think this has more value. I think whatever, right? Because here's the thing I try to tell people. Like if I sit here and tell you, I don't know, deck B is, I like deck B the best for these reasons. Or I think deck C is the one you should buy because you get, I don't know, $25 more value over the cost or whatever it is. That might not be the right reason for you to go get a deck, right? Like you, in either of those cases, you either got a thing because I liked it, or you got it because it made the most financial sense because the cards are worth a little bit more. But you might ultimately hate both decks, right? They may not fit your playstyle. They may not play well with the other decks in your player group. Your friends might not like playing that type of strategy of decks in y'all's player pool. There's a bunch of reasons that could be bad. So I always worry about those statements because you're not knowing you personally or your personal situation means my advice can only go so far. Right? Now, if I'm breaking down a technical item, like, I don't know, the new iPhones coming out or the new Pixels, I can literally say, here's all the factors that make it better or worse than last year's phone, right? Bigger batteries, better screen DPI or whatever, right? And then you have all the information that goes, okay, cool, you can go do this. But at the end, if I were to say, I like this phone or I don't like this phone, like you now have this whole slew of things to like or dislike about it. But on Magic, it's mostly like, does the deck play well? Does it have value? Do I like this style of deck or not? But for each person, even knowing that information, you've got to make that decision for yourself. And I've watched people do that before where like, you know, I watch this video on whatever channel and it tells me to go buy this deck because this is the highest rated one or whatever. This has the most value. And then they get it and they're kind of like, man, I sort of wish I would have bought the other deck because I sort of like these other creature types, or the other deck plays faster and I kind of like that style of Magic or whatever it is. And it's just like, you bought the one that was rated higher, you know. And don't get me wrong, I don't think there's anything wrong with that content because people love that content. And I think if you're in that space, you should continue to make that content. But I think for buyers, always consider your personal situation, your personal finances, your personal taste, your personal skill level, whatever, in addition to whatever's presented to you. Valgavoth, Legit Commander, and Rakdos Aristocrats. Oh, Aristocrats decks are always getting extra parts. So yeah, there's a billion things you can probably add, even from this set, that are going to make sense for those types of decks. But yeah, I don't know. I think overall, Duskmourn, really cool. Lots of options in the set. I think we're going to get some new deck types. I will not be surprised by that. Oh, no. Now you'll have me in stereo. You don't need that. Or actually, I heard it. Y'all didn't hear it. But yeah, I think looking at sets as far as like, this is good, this is bad, this is overpowered, this is underpowered, this is fast, this is slow. I think we're just trying to narrow it down to like very small factors that don't account for a lot of things. Because there's an argument to even be made outside of like trying to make the red decks a half turn faster, that this format's slower than a lot of stuff we've been seeing. But then the other side of that is a lot of those cards are higher impact. So that probably balances out. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this set's slower. And it's like, yeah, but when your opponent gets like a 5/5 or a 6/6 that's making extra things or getting extra value and you don't kill it, then what? You know what I mean? Like, so that's a real part of the conversation to be had. Rob says, that's a big part of the value to me is in watching content. I want a fun to play deck. There may be more powerful cards, but the play pattern's just not my style. Yeah, and I always tell people that, right? Like, when you see one of us creators play a deck, so many people, and that's why on most of my decks, if you notice, I don't care about posting win rates or any of that other stuff. I try to give you contextual information of, it did well for these reasons, it lost for these reasons. That's why I always try to do some conversation in the wrap-up of, here's things that are going to be a problem. Here's some stuff you should work around. These are the things you should always target, right? Because to me, those are more important than just does a deck win or lose. Because the reality is, you can play a whole pile of things on the ladder that are going to be 51 to 60%, whatever, and it's not that uncommon to see that. But again, your skill level, your preferences, whatever, will change your outcomes for the deck. Not to mention, any video of ours you watch, and I say ours being Magic content creators, but really for any game, you're seeing a very small sample size, right? But if we're playing a super fast deck on best of one, you might see 10 games, right? Generally, you're going to be looking at like 5 to 7, whatever. Within those, you're seeing just a snippet of what happens with those decks. So we might get lucky and have played opponents that were bad, good matchups for our decks, might have got lucky top decks or whatever, right? So I always tell people, look at how the wins or loss happened versus the fact that they happened. Because there's been multiple decks that we've had on the channel that went X and 1, X and O, whatever. And I've even said in the videos that like, don't expect these results because we got a little bit lucky here, or I think this game our opponent didn't know about XYZ, like affected a win or a loss, right? Also the other way, where we had a deck go, whatever it was, like 5 and 3 or 4 and 4, and I was like, man, you know what though? 2 of those, we got bad land draws. This other one, our opponent just ripped 3 great cards in a row. Like if those things don't happen, then, maybe we have 2 more wins or whatever. So you got to look at the context even more than just what happened, because I think that tells you more. And then you can just make your decision on if you want to go build those decks or not. Slubble says, so is the Gruul and Azorius Verge land the best out of them since you get access to more aggro color first? I don't really understand that question. So we're talking about Verge lands, you say? So well, that's the wrong one. So we're saying, is the Gruul one and the Azorius one better since you get access to more aggro colors first? I don't think I understand the structure of the question. Like, why? I mean, like, Azorius even only has, like, one, what I would call real aggro build. So, like, wouldn't the black-red one be equally as good? Right? Getting access to black and then red if you're playing, I don't know, lizards, maybe? Like, yeah, I don't understand. Like, yeah, I'm just gonna say no. I think they all have variable uses depending on the decks they're being put in. I think they're pretty close to even. Matt says, I find printing proxies and testing cards for buying anything. Well, if you want to, that makes sense. I will say on Moxfield, you can also, when you put your deck in, if you scroll down, you can do practice draws and everything with your decks through there too and test it out. P-Thread says, do you think life gain could be a thing in Duskmourn with the new ley line and standard? I've played 2 variations of life gain already, and those are a thing. I didn't spell ley line right. So feel free to check those out on the channel. I think one of them was like mono white. The other one we just did. Actually, we have 3 different ones technically, because we have 2 different ones that played the Stoat and had life gain. A new life-based life gain? Are you talking about this one? If you would gain life, you gain that much +1, as long as you have 7 life more than your starting life total creatures. Like, probably? I mean, I would have put it in the deck I put up today. Was it today? That had the Death Touch, Lifelink, blah, blah, whatever. Like, that deck could support this. So, like, those decks are already playable, so, like, I don't see a reason why you couldn't play this. I won't say it's because of this card. I think those decks are already playable. I just think this is another useful card for them. Can we stop finally using the terrible Thran Portal? I actually just never play with Thran Portal. Like, I get why they're in decks. Don't get me wrong, I genuinely do. And it makes sense. But I just never play with Thran Portal. I just feel there's too many times I either don't want to give up the life, or it just feels like it makes some of my stuff a little bit clunky. So I just generally choose not to play it. Like it's a playable card. Don't get me wrong. Just for me personally, my playstyle, whatever, I just never want the portal. And it hasn't hindered me. And there's a couple of times, but it's hindered me so little that I don't really worry about it. It's like Righteous Valkyrie on enchantment. Yeah, kinda. Serrani says, I was going to ask you to rank the Overlord cards, but I think you already did that earlier. I didn't rank them because I don't think ranking is worth your time to listen to me rank them, truthfully. And I don't think there's anything to gain because ranking them is pointless if you're like, I'm not saying it is, but because of hype, let's just say I say the green one's the best one. All right, what does that do for you if you're building a red deck? You know what I mean? Like, having them ranked doesn't do anything for you. So what we did is we talked about each of the cards, and that was about an hour ago. But we talked about each of the overlords and kind of how you could use them, different deck possibilities, what type of decks could come because of them, and, you know, just give you ideas and structure around the cards that you can use and actually put that to functional use. Because that conversation, I think, is much more valuable. I think just ranking stuff is like, we rank stuff for fun and exercise and whatever, and it's opinion based and whatever, and like that's cool. But I don't think that helps you in deck building. So I think having more context around each card is just more valuable. Gabriel on YouTube says, I just bought 2 for a store championship. I hate them so much. Oh, you're talking about the Thran Portal? Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. With the new lands, you don't need them anymore. Like, yes and no. Like, because here's the thing. Again, going back to talk about the lands, right? If the goal of having the Thran portals was to guarantee you had a specific color all the time, but you're willing to replace it with these, and let's say you're playing 4 Thran portal, why were you already not willing to play 2 mountains, 2 forests? Because that's basically what you're getting. Because you're not going to have other basic land types early, right? You see what I'm saying? So, like, I don't know if this outright replaces your Thran portals. Because if you weren't willing to play 2 mountains, 2 forests before, are you still okay having these as only a red land on turn 1? Or only a green land on turn 1? When you would want the other one? I don't know that answer. Like I said, for me, maybe, but I was already willing to not play Thran Portal. Like, we were just talking about that. Like, I hate Thran Portal enough that I just chose not to play with it. It just was not my jam, a little too clunky, didn't like the life loss, whatever. So, for me, and now again, there's situations because you want the damage and whatever that, like, you probably still want to play them. So I'm not saying it's a trash card. Just for a lot of decks, for me, I just chose not to play them. Especially when I'm trying to, like, manage life total against other aggressive decks or whatever. It just was a thing I didn't want to bother with. So I'm not going to say these are an outright replacement for those. I think for what those decks are trying to do, you might still need them to be possible to be either color early on. Because again, if you don't already have another mountain or a forest, these are just effectively a mountain and just effectively a forest. And if that's okay for that deck, like I said, the real question is, why were you not already just playing 2 forests, 2 mountains anyway instead of your 4 Thran Portal? The Thran Portals were giving you something, or something you felt your deck needed, that you were willing to play those over those 2 other basics. Now, in places where you're already willing to play the basics, then these are kind of an upgrade anyway, that just occasionally get you the other color. Life gain decks will want the Enduring Tenacity card. Yeah, probably. Let's go take a look. Enduring Tenacity. Maybe. This, like, here's the thing. This feels more like bats kind of want this card. Right? Where they're already gaining a bunch of life, losing a bunch of life, or whatever. Like, they kind of want this. I think the decks that we're talking about that are like the life gain creatures and whatever, we can play black for this. I mean, I guess we do, since we're already doing aggressive things in the life gain. Probably over... I'm trying to think like what other cards we would replace with this. The fact that it's a creature makes me say yes. That you want to play this in the life gain. Assuming your life gain deck already has black in it. If you're playing like mono white or whatever, white blue, whatever, you're obviously not going to play this. But if you're playing something that already has black in it, or like the deck we put up today, that was like lifelink, death touch, whatever, you know, first strike, then like this could play that because we had enough things that gain life, and it's justifiable. I think the green-white decks, the mono-white decks that are gaining life, obviously can't play this, but yeah, there's some room for this card. I think it's totally reasonable. And then again, if it dies, you still have the ability to just drain your opponent for extra, right? You hit somebody with a stoat, they take 4. that's a real threatening thing. Hell, if you block the stoat, they still take 2. So why not, right? Sanguine Bahan combo piece? Yeah, for sure. Just another bit of redundancy for those decks if you're already playing those in like Commander or whatever. The Optimator, I saw you sneak in here. Welcome. But you know what I got to do, y'all? I got to wrap this up because I got some Magic to go play at my local store for another store championship. I'm going to try to win me another Urza Saga land because those are really cool and worth a lot. And they're like 15 minutes from me, so I got to go. This was cool, though. We talked about pretty much all the big things out of the set. So I hope, ultimately, this helped everybody. A chance to ask all your questions, to learn a little bit more about the set, figure out what you want to play or not. Don't forget, like I said, next Wednesday, you're going to see a bunch of your favorite streamers streaming all of the Duskmourn stuff all day, literally all day. Thanks to Wizards for letting me to participate in that. That's awesome. I'll be on 2 sessions. I'll be doing the morning stuff from likely about 10 a.m. Pacific till 2, and then again from around 7 p.m. Pacific until midnight. So you'll get 2 long sessions with me on Wednesday. And at some point in the next couple of days, me and Dev are going to do some more content for you. So we'll do our standard overrated, underrated cards. So y'all will get those for Duskmourn. And I think Friday next week, maybe Thursday, but probably Friday next week, you should get the cards to craft and not to craft from Duskmourn as well, since those went so well for us for whatever the last one was, Bloomborough. So you'll be getting those as well. So yeah, lots of content coming down the pipe. I'm going to be insanely busy and probably tired for the next week. So I hope y'all appreciate everything that's coming out. Again, thank you to everybody who subscribed, where you subscribed and followed. Much appreciated. Again, if you want to get private deck help for like $5 a month, which is basically equivalent to a subscription on Twitch, but we get more of it if you subscribe over on YouTube. We have a level that you can get that on there. If you want to even have discussion about what content we're going to cover on the channel, what decks we're going to talk about first, what we're going to showcase. If you're a 99 cents level 1 member on YouTube, you'll get to be part of those polls and those questions and those things when those go out. So that's another way you can support me, and you can be involved in on the content if you want to do that. So yeah, lots of opportunity, lots of ways to support. And don't forget, we got merch. Matter of fact, ooh. All right, I'm going to show you all one thing before we leave. For those of you that stuck around. But check this out. I'm telling y'all, we've been working on a new design, which I was really excited about. And these literally just came in today. I just got the samples. So nobody else even knows about these yet. But I got this done on a playmat, which I'm going to take to the store with me today and use it. And we're going to have these both in black and white, which I thought were really cool. So I'm really excited about these. I thought this was a fun design. Like throwback Magic stuff that has just like other meaning, which is really cool. So yeah, I'm really, really glad those came out the way they did. They look super sweet. And I'm hoping people enjoy those when they go up. So yeah, if you want to support your boy, we have all kinds of merch and other fun things linked on YouTube. But you can also go, I guess I'll copy the link for you and just tell you, you can just go to my shop if you want to do that, because anything helps. Every little bit. Let me click this real quick. There we go. And then I will just leave this link here for everybody. So wherever you are, you should be able to have that. So there you go. Like, cool stuff for everybody. Oh, man. All right. I got to get out of here. I got some Magic to play. Hope y'all always get the luck that you want. As always, wherever you're watching, whenever you're watching, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Please remember to take care of yourselves, your family, all that good stuff. Remember to be awesome, but most importantly, be awesome to each other. I'm going to get out of here, grabbing my decks, ready to go. Hopefully get some wins with my new playmat and stuff. But yeah, we'll see you at bare minimum next Wednesday. Don't forget to check out the videos on the YouTube channel because they're every day, and I put in a lot of work, so I appreciate y'all watching.